My name is Daniel Harper, and for the longest time, I thought I had life figured out. At least, that's what I told myself every morning as I stared into the mirror, adjusting my tie and rehearsing the same tired smile I'd been wearing for years. I was 34 years old, living in a cramped apartment in the heart of the city, working a corporate job that paid well but left me feeling empty. My days were a monotonous cycle of meetings, deadlines, and late-night takeout dinners eaten alone in front of the TV. I wasn't unhappy, exactly, but I wasn't happy either. I had convinced myself that this was just how life worked. You grew up, got a job, paid your bills, and hoped for the best. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped dreaming. But all of that changed one rainy afternoon when a scruffy little stray dog wandered into my life. And in doing so, turned everything upside down. It started with the rain, the kind of relentless downpour that turns streets into rivers and makes umbrellas useless. I was walking home from work, my suit jacket draped over my head in a futile attempt to stay dry, when I noticed him. He was crouched under a bus stop bench, his fur matted and muddy, his ribs visible beneath his thin frame. His eyes, though weary, were sharp and intelligent, watching me with a mix of caution and curiosity. At first, I didn't think much of it. Stray dogs weren't uncommon in the city, and I usually avoided them. They reminded me too much of the chaos I tried so hard to escape every day. But something about this particular dog caught my attention. Maybe it was the way he tilted his head slightly as if studying me, or maybe it was the quiet desperation in his gaze. Whatever it was, I found myself stopping in front of him. "Hey there," I said softly, crouching down a few feet away. "Where did you come from?" The dog didn't move, but his tail gave a hesitant wag. It was such a small gesture, yet it spoke volumes. "You look like you've had a rough day," I muttered, glancing around to see if anyone else was nearby. The street was deserted, save for the occasional car splashing through puddles. No one seemed to be looking for him, or even paying attention to him. Against my better judgment, I reached into my bag and pulled out the sandwich I had packed for lunch but never eaten. I unwrapped it carefully and placed it on the ground between us. The dog sniffed cautiously before devouring it in seconds. "Well, at least you've got an appetite," I said with a faint smile. I knew I should leave. The rain was still pouring, and I had a pile of emails waiting for me back in my apartment. But something kept me rooted in place. Maybe it was the way the dog looked at me afterward, his head cocked to the side, as if to say, "Thank you." Or maybe it was the realization that this creature, who had nothing, was showing more gratitude than I could remember feeling in years. Eventually, I stood up and sighed. "All right, buddy. Stay safe, okay?" I turned to leave, but before I could take more than a few steps, I heard the soft patter of paws behind me. I glanced over my shoulder to see the dog following me, his tail wagging tentatively. "No," I said firmly, pointing back toward the bus stop. "You can't come with me." He sat down on the wet pavement, his big brown eyes fixed on mine. "I mean it," I insisted, though my resolve was already wavering. But the dog didn't budge. He simply waited, his expression patient yet resolute. In that moment, I realized he wasn't going to give up, not until I gave in. With a groan, I knelt down again. "Fine, but only because it's raining." That decision marked the beginning of a journey neither of us could have anticipated. Little did I know, this scruffy stray would teach me lessons about life I never knew I needed to learn. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself that keeping him was temporary. After all, I barely had room for myself in my tiny apartment. How could I possibly make space for a dog? And yet, every time I considered taking him to a shelter, I found myself hesitating. I named him Max, mostly because it seemed fitting for a dog who had shown up out of nowhere and refused to leave. He was unlike any dog I'd ever met, street-smart, resourceful, and surprisingly affectionate despite his rough exterior. It quickly became clear that Max had been on his own for a long time. He flinched at sudden movements and eyed strangers warily, but with me, he was different. Around me, he relaxed in a way that suggested he trusted me completely. At first, having Max around disrupted my routine in ways I hadn't anticipated. Morning walks replaced my usual coffee and news ritual, and evenings were spent playing fetch instead of scrolling aimlessly through social media. I even started buying groceries in bulk, not just for myself, but for him too. But the biggest change wasn't in my schedule, it was in my mindset. For years, I had prided myself on being self-sufficient, on not needing anyone or anything. Yet here was Max, completely dependent on me for food, shelter, and companionship. And somehow, instead of resenting it, I found myself enjoying it. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Max resting his head on my lap, I realized something surprising. I felt content. Not the fleeting kind of satisfaction that came from completing a project or receiving praise at work, but a deeper, quieter sense of fulfillment. It was as if Max had filled a void I hadn't even known existed. Of course, it wasn't always easy. There were moments of frustration, like the time he chewed through my favorite pair of sneakers or tracked mud across the entire apartment after a particularly muddy walk. But even those incidents were overshadowed by the joy he brought into my life. As the weeks passed, I began to notice subtle changes in myself. I was smiling more, laughing more, and finding beauty in things I had once overlooked. The golden glow of sunrise filtering through my window, the sound of rain tapping against the glass, the way Max's ears perked up whenever he heard me coming home. Max also introduced me to people I might never have met otherwise. During our daily walks, neighbors often stopped to pet him or ask about his story. Some shared their own experiences with rescue animals, while others simply admired his scrappy charm. Through these interactions, I discovered a sense of community I hadn't realized I was missing. But perhaps the most profound lesson Max taught me was about resilience. Despite everything he had endured, abandonment, hunger, loneliness, he remained hopeful. He approached each new day with enthusiasm, eager to explore the world and connect with those around him. Watching him, I couldn't help but reflect on my own attitude toward life. How often had I allowed fear or complacency to hold me back? How many opportunities had I missed because I was too focused on staying safe? Max challenged me to step outside my comfort zone, to embrace uncertainty and trust that things would work out. Whether it was trying a new hobby, striking up conversations with strangers, or simply saying yes to spontaneous adventures, he inspired me to live more fully. By the end of the first month, I knew one thing for certain. Max wasn't just a stray dog who had wandered into my life. He was a teacher, a guide, and a friend, all rolled into one scruffy, lovable package. And though I didn't know what the future held, I was grateful for whatever lay ahead, as long as Max was by my side. As weeks turned into months, Max and I settled into a rhythm that felt surprisingly natural. Our days began with early morning walks through the park, where the air was crisp and filled with the sounds of birds chirping and leaves rustling. These walks became sacred moments for me, a chance to clear my mind and reconnect with the world outside my apartment. For Max, they were an opportunity to explore every scent, every sound, and every corner of the neighborhood. But it wasn't just the routine that changed. It was the way I viewed life itself. Before Max, I had been so focused on productivity and achievement that I rarely took the time to appreciate the small things. Now, thanks to him, I found myself noticing details I had overlooked before. The way sunlight filtered through tree branches, the intricate patterns of frost on winter mornings, or the friendly nods from neighbors who had become familiar faces. Max had a knack for finding joy in the simplest moments. A stick in the grass, a puddle to splash in, or even an empty cardboard box could keep him entertained for hours. Watching him reminded me how easy it was to lose sight of the beauty in everyday experiences when you're constantly chasing bigger goals. One particular incident stands out in my memory, a rainy Saturday afternoon when I decided to clean out my closet. It was one of those chores I had been putting off for months, dreading the mess and effort it would require. As I pulled out old clothes and knickknacks, Max bounded into the room, his tail wagging furiously. "What are you so excited about?" I asked, laughing as he sniffed at a pile of discarded sweaters. Before I knew it, he had grabbed one of the sweaters in his mouth and started tugging it across the floor. I tried to take it back, but he darted away, playfully dodging my attempts to catch him. All right, I said, finally giving up and collapsing onto the floor. You win. Max dropped the sweater triumphantly at my feet, then flopped down beside me, panting happily. In that moment, surrounded by clutter and chaos, I realized something important. Happiness doesn't come from having everything perfectly organized or achieving some grand milestone. Sometimes, it's as simple as sharing a laugh with someone you love, even if that someone is a dog. As our bond deepened, so did my understanding of the lessons Max was teaching me. One of the most profound was the importance of presence. In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to get caught up in worries about the future or regrets about the past. But Max lived entirely in the present moment, fully immersed in whatever he was doing. Whether it was chewing on a toy, napping in a patch of sunlight, or greeting me at the door with uncontainable excitement, he approached each experience with a level of mindfulness I couldn't help but admire. I began to emulate this mindset, consciously focusing on the here and now instead of letting my thoughts drift endlessly. During our walks, I made an effort to notice the textures beneath my feet, the crunch of gravel, the softness of moss, or the subtle changes in the seasons. At work, I practiced being fully engaged in conversations rather than mentally multitasking. Even during mundane tasks like washing dishes or folding laundry, I tried to find something positive to focus on. The shift wasn't immediate. It took practice and patience, but over time, I noticed a significant difference in my overall well-being. My stress levels decreased, and I felt more grounded and connected to the world around me. Another lesson Max taught me was the value of vulnerability. When we first met, he was cautious and guarded, flinching at sudden movements and retreating whenever he felt threatened. But as he grew more comfortable with me, he began to let his guard down. He allowed himself to be vulnerable, rolling onto his back for belly rubs, curling up next to me on the couch, or whimpering softly when he needed comfort. His willingness to trust me, despite his past hardships, inspired me to open up in ways I hadn't done in years. For so long, I had prided myself on being independent and self-reliant, believing that asking for help was a sign of weakness. But Max showed me that true strength lies in acknowledging your needs and allowing others to support you. This realization came to a head during a particularly difficult period at work. I was juggling multiple projects, struggling to meet deadlines, and feeling increasingly overwhelmed. Normally, I would have bottled up my frustration and pushed through without saying a word. But one evening, after coming home exhausted and irritable, I found myself breaking down in front of Max. I don't know what to do, I admitted, tears streaming down my face as I sank onto the floor. Max immediately came to my side, resting his head on my knee and looking up at me with concerned eyes. His presence was incredibly comforting, as if he understood exactly what I was going through. That night, I called my best friend, Sarah, and told her everything. It was the first time in years I had confided in anyone about my struggles. To my surprise, she didn't judge me or offer unsolicited advice. Instead, she listened patiently and reminded me that it was okay to ask for help. The conversation marked a turning point for me. I started delegating tasks at work, setting boundaries, and prioritizing self-care. It wasn't always easy, old habits die hard, but I was determined to create a healthier balance in my life. Max also introduced me to new experiences that pushed me out of my comfort zone. One weekend, while browsing online, I stumbled across an advertisement for a local dog-friendly hiking event. The idea intrigued me, but I hesitated. Hiking wasn't something I had ever considered. I wasn't particularly outdoorsy, and the thought of navigating trails with Max seemed daunting. But Max's enthusiasm convinced me to give it a try. On the day of the event, we arrived at the trailhead bright and early, armed with water bottles, snacks, and plenty of determination. The hike was challenging, with steep inclines and rocky terrain that tested both our endurance and teamwork. There were moments when I wanted to turn back, but Max's unwavering energy kept me going. When we finally reached the summit, the view took my breath away. Rolling hills stretched out below us, bathed in golden sunlight. Max sat beside me, panting happily as he gazed at the horizon. "We did it, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ears. That hike marked the beginning of a new chapter for us. Over the following months, we explored countless trails, parks, and nature reserves, each adventure bringing us closer together. Through these experiences, I discovered a passion for the outdoors that I never knew I had. Looking back, I realized that Max wasn't just teaching me practical lessons about resilience, presence, and vulnerability. He was showing me how to live authentically, how to embrace life's challenges and joys with equal fervor. With him by my side, I felt braver, kinder, and more alive than I had in years. And yet, I knew our journey was far from over. Life still held its share of uncertainties, and there were undoubtedly more lessons waiting to be learned. But whatever lay ahead, I was ready to face it, as long as Max was there to guide me. As Max and I continued our adventures together, I began to notice something remarkable. The impact of his presence wasn't limited to just me. He had a way of touching the lives of everyone he encountered, creating ripples of kindness and connection that extended far beyond our little world. It started subtly, at first, with neighbors who would stop to pet him during our walks or ask about his story. Many of them were dog lovers themselves, eager to share anecdotes about their own pets. Others were simply drawn to his scrappy charm and infectious enthusiasm. Over time, these brief interactions evolved into meaningful conversations, and some even blossomed into friendships. One such friendship began with Mrs. Thompson, an elderly woman who lived a few blocks away. She was often seen sitting on her porch, knitting or reading, and Max always made a point to greet her enthusiastically whenever we passed by. At first, she seemed hesitant, keeping her distance as if unsure how to respond to his exuberance. But Max's persistence paid off. After a few weeks, she started leaving treats for him on her front steps. "Your dog is quite the charmer," she told me one afternoon, handing me a small bag of homemade biscuits she had baked for Max. "He has a way of winning people over," I replied with a smile. From that day on, Mrs. Thompson became a regular part of our routine. She would join us for short walks around the block, sharing stories about her late husband and their beloved golden retriever. In return, Max provided her with companionship and joy, brightening her days in ways neither of us could have anticipated. But Max's influence didn't stop there. During one of our hikes, we met a young couple struggling with their energetic Labrador puppy. The dog kept pulling on its leash, darting off the trail, and generally causing chaos. The couple looked frazzled, clearly at their wits' end. Max, sensing their frustration, trotted over and sat calmly beside them. His demeanor seemed to say, "It's okay, I've been there." "Wow, your dog is so well-behaved," the woman exclaimed, watching as Max patiently waited for me to hand him a treat. "It wasn't always like this," I admitted. He taught me a lot about patience and training along the way. We spent the next hour chatting, exchanging tips and advice while the puppy gradually calmed down under Max's watchful eye. By the time we parted ways, the couple thanked us profusely, saying they felt more confident about handling their pup. These moments reinforced what I already suspected. Max had a gift for bringing people together. Whether it was through shared laughter, heartfelt conversations, or simple acts of kindness, he created connections that transcended age, background, and circumstance. As our community grew stronger, so did my sense of purpose. Before Max, I had viewed my life as a series of obligations, work, bills, routines that left little room for meaning or fulfillment. Now I saw it differently. Every interaction, every experience felt like an opportunity to make a difference, no matter how small. This newfound perspective led me to volunteer at a local animal shelter, inspired by Max's journey and the countless other strays waiting for their second chance. At first, I was nervous. I wasn't sure how much help I could offer, but the staff welcomed me warmly, assigning me tasks like walking dogs, cleaning kennels, and assisting with adoption events. The work was challenging, but incredibly rewarding. Seeing the resilience and hope in the eyes of these animals reminded me of Max and everything he had overcome. It also deepened my appreciation for the bond between humans and animals, a connection built on trust, empathy, and unconditional love. During one of my shifts, I met a shy teenager named Emily who had recently adopted a scruffy terrier mix named Charlie. Like Max, Charlie had been found wandering the streets, malnourished and scared. Watching Emily interact with him brought back memories of my early days with Max. The tentative steps, the growing trust, the unspoken promise to never give up. "You're doing great," I told her as Charlie wagged his tail enthusiastically. "Thanks," she said, her face lighting up with pride. "He's changed my life." Her words stayed with me long after we parted ways. They echoed the truth I had come to understand. Rescuing a dog doesn't just save them, it transforms the rescuer too. Max's lessons weren't confined to external experiences. They also prompted deeper introspection within myself. As I reflected on the changes he had sparked in my life, I realized that the most profound transformation wasn't external, it was internal. Before Max, I had been stuck in a cycle of self-doubt and fear. I avoided risks, shied away from vulnerability, and clung to the illusion of control. But Max shattered that illusion, showing me that life is unpredictable and messy, and that's precisely what makes it beautiful. Through him, I learned to embrace uncertainty, to trust in the process, and to believe in the power of love. Not just romantic love, but the kind of love that exists in everyday moments. The warmth of a wagging tail, the comfort of a shared silence, the joy of being present. This realization came to a head during a particularly poignant moment. One evening, as we sat together on the couch, Max rested his head on my lap, his breathing slow and steady. For the first time, I noticed the gray hairs sprinkled throughout his fur, a subtle reminder that time was passing faster than I cared to admit. I ran my fingers through his coat, feeling a lump form in my throat. "You've changed my life, you know that," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Max lifted his head slightly, his big brown eyes meeting mine. Then, with a soft sigh, he rested his head back on my knee. In that moment, I understood something profound. Max hadn't just saved me, he had shown me what it means to truly live, to be present, to connect deeply, and to find beauty in imperfection. As the months turned into years, Max and I continued to grow together, navigating life's ups and downs with equal parts humor and grace. There were still challenges, of course, days when work felt overwhelming or when the weight of the world pressed heavily on my shoulders. But even on those days, Max was there, reminding me to breathe, to focus on the present, and to find joy in the little things. Looking back, I realized that adopting Max wasn't just an act of kindness toward an animal in need. It was a gift I gave to myself. He saved me in ways I never thought possible, teaching me to trust again, to love again, to live again. Together, we created a life filled with purpose, connection, and endless possibilities. And though the scars of the past will always remain, they no longer define me. Because of Max, I learned that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about finding ways to carry it gracefully, using it as fuel for growth and transformation. So here's to Max, to second chances, and to the incredible bond between humans and animals. May we continue to learn from them, cherish them, and honor the love they bring into our lives. Because sometimes the smallest beings have the biggest hearts and the greatest capacity to heal.